Alright guys, so in this video I'll be talking about one of, if not the, most controversial video games for the gaming community. This game has gamers divided, with many people loving this game to bits, as well as the huge amount of people despising it with a passion. The amount of endless videos on the internet that rant on about how much they dislike The Last of Us Part 2, and it's crazy to see so many people devoting their time to spread actual hate and toxicity, and mainly just for impressions, which I'm not going to be doing in this video, as I'm not a fan of simply complaining about a game for 20 minutes on end. But instead I'll actually try to record all the things that Naughty Dog did to make people hate the game and give people a better understanding to fans on why The Last of Us Part 2 is hated by so many people. Because just to clarify, I love this game and I think Naughty Dog did an incredible job, and it's become one of my all-time favourite games. If you're ready, hit that like button down below and you can subscribe to the channel for more gaming and G Fuel videos if you would like to, of course, and let's just jump right into it. Starting off with the Depressing Story. Now, there's nothing bad about a video game's story and mood be so upright, depressing and emotional like in The Last of Us Part 2, however, from the majority of negative talk about this game, with a good amount coming from the personal preference of the players not being a fan of this type of story. It's clearly shown that The Last of Us Part 2 is aimed for people that generally enjoy dark and emotionally draining stories that provide a dark theme. Like, the whole story is just escalating in front of the player's eyes as they play, with little to no hope of the character actually getting back on track. Whereas here's the mistaken bit: the first game. It was all based on following Joel, who then meets Ellie early on, and from then on out the player can slowly start to see a positive bond and connection between them both. Although they are surviving a zombie apocalypse, they learn many things along the way in one another and build a strong trust, so therefore it creates a heartwarming and touching story to the player, with an overall positive feeling mostly. Although, as we all know, the second game was almost a complete opposite, as like Druckmann said all the way back in 2016. It was going to be about hate, and due to the first game not being as dark and depressing, it's obvious that many players in the first fanbase that Neil Druckmann built in the first game was bound to respond negatively. Therefore, the community felt like the Part 2 was not being anywhere like the first game in terms of the theme and actually linking on to the first game, with the sequel feeling like an instinctive continuation of it. But unfortunately, to one side of the fanbase, it went completely in opposition to the reason why the first game was so loved. Now on to another big reason to why people hate this game, with what I feel like is one, if not the main reason, and that's the death of Joel. Now, Joel was definitely an extremely close character to me and many fans, as we literally play as him in the first game, and that bond between Ellie was incredible to see, and he does stand on a very high pedestal in not only The Last of Us but in the whole gaming community. Therefore, to have him die so early on, when we've only really controlled his character for a very short period of time, and not having him die at not only the final moments of the game, but also not in such a small and simple way like he did, it's once again bound to cause backlash. People were not going to be prepared for the story after this. It was a very early moment, and due to the structure of the story making it feel like they kind of, in a way, disrespected Joel due to Abby killing him, which was someone we barely knew off the back, as well as the fanbase of the first game wanting to, if he was going to die, in a more like courageous and powerful way than just, getting beaten up with a golf club by a stranger. The character of Joel in the first game was so untrusting of strangers, even untrusting of Ellie at the start, but obviously that starts to grow and changes throughout, where he, starts to trust her with the rifle, etc. Like the scene that lots of people talk about in the first game, where Joel literally sees a guy on his knees begging for help in the streets and proceeds to, floor the gas and run him over because it was a trap. Then compared to his death in the second one, where he helps a random person, then enters a room full of 7, heavily armed strangers, but quickly, carelessly introduces himself with his name of Joel, and even offers to go back to his place. Like, just the small details of even the positioning of where he was in the open room of surrounding strangers, and not on, the side of it near the door to kind of move away quickly, as well as the way he's just standing and his posture seeming so chill and not really being ready. making it so unlike his true character, where he isn't trying to defend himself in any way. Although people do say that it has been, a few years since living in Jackson and being in a safe environment, unlike the first game. Therefore, he could have, forgotten his ways to kind of self-defend and pretty much survive. But sadly, that wasn't given off as much, and it should have been made a lot more defined and clear to the player that he's lost this, but there was nothing to show it. And that's a very big reasoning as to why the death of Joel was so lazy and out of character to some players that despise the game. And then there's the poor structure of the game, and how there's so many people that complain about how hard the story was to follow, and that's what made the game run so bad. Although having a game with many different perspectives and flashbacks entwined in it, with the two different timelines of playing as Ellie then Abby in the past, with the many flashbacks used in between, like I said. The structure and action of the game is very different to other stories I have actually played. I don't know about you. It starts off with a somewhat positive and calm introduction to the characters and even the setting of Jackson. Then of course we see the big event happens with Joel dying and instantly starting Ellie's revenge on Abby. The action and the suspense builds very gradually as the player meets Abby with Ellie, but suddenly as the intense climax moment is about to take place between them, the instant switch between the two protagonists happens, and the slow build up of what Abby does the few days before she meets Ellie in her perspective for like the next 10 or so hours of the game. But the story of Abby could be seen by many players as somewhat of a drag due to her being a lot slower. Like her half was, many small missions, and they don't really add an awful lot. To some people, this is because she isn't really following a certain road towards her goal, so it does feel slow and with no kind of rising tension or action, which we definitely saw more in Ellie's perspective, of course. So it kicks off again when Abby meets her friends' bodies on the floor where Ellie killed them, and the fight between Ellie and Abby starts in Abby's perspective, but neither of them actually die until the end, where Ellie still wants Abby dead. So the overall structure, where it's not like normal, where you may play a bit of one character then a bit of another, and kind of just working back and forth in comparison with each other, to not only not bore the player but not drop the action or the climax. And especially in this game where the player has seen Abby kill Joel, a beloved character, it just, it left people outraged that they had to play as Abby for so long, making it seem so weird to people that thought we had to be forced to play a hero and a villain by the game. Although it's kind of clear by the end that no one really got out, and that is pretty much everyone's kind of wrongdoings, that from the way Abby retaliated from the death of her dad by Joel, and Ellie's revenge, making a lot deeper meaning that led to so many problems with people. Moving on to another reason of the ending which players truly despise after their hatred with Abby from the very start when she killed Joel, as well as just her character being different to the others, and how, although it is sad and wrong, some people think that it's just unrealistic for her to get that muscular and big, although it isn't, and they can, and overall hating her character for many different reasonings. Though the game decides for Ellie to spare Abby after all her feelings of revenge and everything she went through, or if not that, not giving them a choice to kill her or not, I feel like there would have been a lot less hate because of players wanting Abby dead so bad, and how much they kind of went through and the different events that took place in both Ellie and Abby for her to be spared after all that. Players did think that they really did all that for the one thing that they wanted to happen, not even happen, adding on to the point that the game makes the characters suffer so much with the intention of no good outcome in the end, and make people feel just negative emotions throughout. As I spoke about earlier, where it isn't just a game for everyone. Now I do want to talk about for a bit about how this game gets a lot of undeserved hate for many wrong reasonings. Like I said, to how Abby is so unrealistically big for women and same gender couples, and people still believe that the reasoning Joel died was to get across the message that, men are bad and women are good, creating a big, just hateful mess surrounding the game for the worst reasons from homophobics, and not actually being able to get any legitimate and genuine reasons to why they dislike the game. basically only seeing people send insults to the producers and the actors in such a sick way, like for example the actors of Laura Bailey, of course played Abby, and how haters were sending little death threats and disgusting insults, as well as the director of Neil Druckmann, which creates such a sad image on the game's response, which unfortunately is still carrying on to this day. As I was saying, it kind of overtakes the actual genuine reasons as to why this game is hated, like the other ones I've mentioned in this video, which I personally believe are the main ones of why it has so much hatred and how it really divided the fan base. I may have missed some small ones, but let's just have a conversation in the comments about it, and it would be really appreciated if you showed your support on the video. But I'm pretty sure that is everything as to why people hate The Last of Us Part 2. And I really hope you did enjoy it, although as you may be able to tell, these types of videos do tend to take a lot longer to produce and make, so thank you so much if you've watched to the end. I really do enjoy making them, and I'm excited for more of these type of videos, so comment down below what kind of gaming topics you want to see me talk about next, and there you guys have it. Goodbye.